My name is Peter, and today here in Sonic Platinum I'm going to show you around this car and tell you all about it. And there is quite a lot to tell because this car is jam-packed with luxury and technology, which you can of course expect from Lexus. It all starts here at the front of course, and the first thing you'll recognize is this sort of maybe shark nose. Obviously that's for aerodynamic purposes, because a full electric car you want to be as efficient as possible and get the maximum range out of your battery. But the whole car is, I would say, sculpted almost. We'll see it in the back in a little bit as well. There's a lot of aero details to make the car as efficient as possible. So it's great. Daytime running lights, integrated blinkers here, big beams, LED lights, obviously with the big logo here in the front, and the first camera. There's a whole slew of cameras and sensors and safety systems in this car as well, which we'll get to in a minute. Walking around the car, 20-inch wheels on this version, here in this Sonic Platinum color. And I think it has a bit of a Jaguar I-Pace vibe when I saw it the first time. Let me know in the comments if you agree with that. I think it's quite a striking car. It's certainly not a coupe-like SUV. It's also not really a traditional SUV where the back sort of cuts off here. So it's a little bit of both, and I think it's quite a good-looking car this way. 4.80 m long, so it's a big car. And you'll see inside as well, you can see out here already that the wheelbase is quite large and there's quite a lot of space in the interior as well, which is key because obviously you want to be as practical as possible when it comes to an SUV. This car certainly is. There's a lot of aero details down here too. You can see the sort of shape here down the side. We'll put some B-roll side shots in with this skirt here. And same thing with these flared sort of wheel arches. It gives you a bit of an extension of the car, gives you a bit of a feeling of height. And at the same time, it cuts off the shape of the car a bit more to create a flat surface for the wheels. So it's quite nice. The design really, it fits together and it feels like a big car from the outside. When you're in it and you're driving it, it also feels like it. So it really feels its size. When we walk to the back, I think a very nice Lexus design with this long light across the full width of the car. Tiny brake light up here actually, with this little spoiler. And the aero features that I mentioned are of course these fins here on the top. And you can also see that that shark nose sort of extends back here. It's like this whole line over the car with these curves, all for aerodynamic efficiency of course, but I think it also looks quite nice. Opening the boot, more than 500 liters of boot capacity. And I've put a bunch of stuff inside so you can get a bit of a feel of reference. IKEA bag here, a normal hand luggage bag, obviously fits very easily. And we also have these slots here on the side in front of the wheel arches for some extra space. So that is also quite nice. There's even more extra space down here. Good for your charging cable, and this actually extends inward so you can actually fit a few more things down there. You don't need oil or anything, but some wiper fluid, all those kind of things I like to keep in my car. So that's, plenty of space to get that out of the way. When we finish the tour around the car, we come back here to the left front where the charging situation is located. Normal 11 kilowatts home charging, as you might expect, and 150 kilowatts of fast charging. So that's not groundbreaking or anything, but the battery capacity is a little over 60 kilowatt hours. So with 150 kilowatts of fast charging, you'll be on your way relatively quickly. So we go to the charging menu, and over here you can see that you can change a few things. So one of them is the fast charging limit. You can also put that down to 125 all the way down to 50 kilowatts if you want to. Because the slower charging is generally slightly better for your battery, so you can set that the way you want it to be. The same thing goes for your charging limit. You can charge it up to 100% or something less, which is the same kind of thing. Less full charging is better for your battery, at least for this kind of battery technology, so you can set that here as well. Obviously, I got to show you the cockpit of this Lexus RZ300e, because there's a lot to see in here. Starting with the color, this is hazel suede, in case you're wondering. Very light brown. A lot of personal preference will come in here, but it is an option that's available. This is the presidential line, so that is the top of the line spec. So there are a few things in here, I'm sure, that are not available in the lower trim levels. But here it is full of technology, and I'm going to show you all of it. We're going to start here on the left side with the door. Now the door has a button that you can press, and it will electronically open the door. Nice and simple. But obviously there has to be a manual override if for some reason there's no electricity in the car. So a lot of manufacturers put that somewhere down here in the footwell or in the door bin. Not Lexus. Lexus says here you can also just pull it twice and then the car will open as well. So that's a very elegant solution, I think. Over here we have traditional window controls and mirror controls. Super simple. Everybody understands how that works. That is a job well done. And the same goes for the steering wheel with real buttons, which is also quite nice, but we'll get to that in a second. The steering wheel is nice and soft with steering wheel heating in this version, so that's also nice. With some traditional stalks here for your indicators and your wipers, so that's also nice. And 2 pedals behind the steering wheel for your regen braking. Interestingly, if you want more regen braking, you have to press the minus pedal. And if you want less regen braking, so more rolling, then you press the plus pedal. So that is slightly counterintuitive as far as I'm concerned. But okay, it works that way. Above here, there's a big sensor bank that is constantly monitoring if you're paying attention. Very annoying at times because it's constantly beeping that I need to look at the road or not fall asleep and so on. I'm sure you can turn it off somewhere. And according to Lexus, the system will also learn where you're going and what you're doing. So if there's a certain turn on your way to work that you drive every day and you always have to look a certain way in order to get around that turn, the system will learn at some point that it is safe and it's all good to go, and then stop warning you about focusing on the road ahead. I haven't had this car long enough to test that out, but according to Lexus, that is how it works. So let's believe him for that. Something that doesn't really work for me personally is something I also didn't like in the Lexus LBX video that we did, is the controls here for your radio and your cruise control and so on. Volume up and down, cruise control on and off is pretty easy, but these 2 joypads here on the side, they are adaptive. So first of all, they're set a certain way, obviously, and with these 2 buttons underneath, you can change the layout of what these buttons do. Since these buttons don't have any indication on them, you get a head-up display that lights up, that shows you which button you're touching and what the function of said button is. Not ideal, because I don't really need to see that in my head-up display, and it's also not something I want to change all the time, because your radio controls are pretty straightforward and your cruise control controls are the same, and I don't really want to flip those around. And because it is all done in the head-up display, even if you touch them lightly or if you just graze them, it lights up and you're like, hey, what's happening? You always have to sort of have that moment of refocus. And then you want to just change the radio station, for example, and you press it and nothing happens. And you have to touch it first till the screen lights up and then you can click on it. So it's a bit too cumbersome. I understand that it's nice and clean to have it all there and not here in a display somewhere. But for some reason, it doesn't really work for me. It didn't work in the LBX Lexus, and it doesn't work for me here either. I'd rather have simple buttons that do one thing and stay there without changing. But it is what it is. It is nice that it's physical buttons, though. What also has physical buttons is the odometer. So up here, I have physical buttons for my trip computer, which is slightly strange because you would expect that to be in the screen, but it isn't. So there's physical buttons here that you can press. Okay, choices. There's another physical button here, which is the power button. That's fine, of course, turning the car on and off. And we have some manual vents here, which is also quite nice. It's just a simple solution that everybody understands, that is already thought through and out-developed. That is just a nice way to adjust your air direction. I don't need to swipe anywhere with a motor behind it that can brake. It's too complicated. This is nice and easy. Everybody understands how this works. Speaking of the air, there is air conditioning, obviously, and that is controlled here with these 2 knobs. I'll turn it on. So the first thing is that there's no physical control for your air speed. You have to do that here with sliding or with pluses and minuses. Okay, but you can see that the temperature here lights up in this ring, and with this ring I can physically change the temperature. So that's actually quite nice. You know, physical control is easier than swiping and sliding, so that's good. Now you might think that this is a screen inside, and technically it is, but it is not another screen, it is just this main screen. They just put a circle here on the corner of the screen, and this 21 is just part of the screen. So it's just a ring. So that's interesting choice. And the same thing goes for this one on the other side, obviously, and then here in the middle you have your volume control. Now these 2 are, there's a click in it. You can feel it click when you change the temperature, so you know when you've done it without even looking at the temperature. But with this one you don't. It's a smooth dial, and which is fine because you can hear when you turn it up and down, right? So it's okay, but it feels a bit cheap, and especially because it's so small as well. So that's that. The screen itself, though, is great. Big, very responsive, very clear. All your controls are in here for the car. web browser, all your settings are in here. So yeah, it's all great. It's not, I said it in the previous Toyotas and Lexus as well, it's not the last word in fantastic design of menus and so on, but it is very functional and it all works really well. And it's fast, it's snappy, it's responsive, so all is well. Quite nice. Below the screen we have some buttons here for your auto parking, your camera view, and 3 USBs for charging, and of course one to connect to your systems. So a lot of charging going on, and you can already see my phone here down in the inductive charging pad, so you can also charge something there. Then we have 2 cup holders here, nice and simple. I got my garage clicker and the key in here, but they are somewhat adaptive, so that's all fine as well. Then we have this piano black bit, which is the only real big piano black bit, so that's, you know, can't fault them for that. For your drive select, this is a turning knob, I suppose, but you have to press this ring down and then you can change in either direction. I'll do it like this. So that way you can select your drive mode. Going down, we have a traction control button, park button, and your auto hold, so pretty standard and pretty straightforward there. So it's all as well, it actually works reasonably okay. We also have a big armrest here in the middle that opens 2 ways. All is well, big storage bin. And last but not least, we have another bin down here with this sort of rubber flap that you can flap out of the way. And then you have your 12-volt socket over here. And you have a little bit of storage down here. Not really sure why it is so tucked away and why it has this little flap. I guess so you can't see from the outside what's in there. It's not really usable space. You maybe put some sunglasses there or something. But that is about it. Speaking of sunglasses though, there is an actual sunglass compartment here with some felt on the inside so your lenses don't scratch. So that's also actually a quite nice solution that my 10-year-old Skoda already had as well. But you don't see it that often in cars anymore these days, so it's actually quite nice that it's included. 2 things I still want to point out. The driver's display looks quite large, but it's actually only this big. So the sides of the display are not a display at all, they're just warning lights. So only the middle part of the display is something that you can actually project information on. There's a few settings on how you want that, but most of the time you'll probably use the head-up display anyway. Then we have to show you the party piece, which is the seat heating. Now, you know this symbol, the symbol for the seat heating, obviously. But as you can tell, there's 2 extra red waves there in the air. That might look a bit funny, but it does actually have a function. It's the infrared heating. So I have it as a driver under the steering wheel, and the passenger has it in the place where the glove box could have been, but there is no glove box in this car. So this is an infrared heating pad or radiator or however you call it, which is actually very nice. It sounds like a gimmick, but you really notice it. When you sit here, you turn the seat heating on, you're like, ooh, you can feel it radiate on the top of your thighs and your knees. It's actually quite pleasant, and it's a different way of heating, obviously, so you don't have to like warm the air in here to make it slightly comfortable. It's actually nice and cozy when it's cold outside that your knees get heated that way. And it gives you a little bit of that feeling of that Lexus luxury that this car breathes all the time. So it's quite a nice touch, and I thought I wasn't going to hate it, but it is actually quite nice, I have to admit. This car is the presidential line, which is the top of the tree in terms of spec, and it comes with a Mark Levinson sound system. So we're going to have a look at that. Can't play any music, of course, for copyright reasons, but we can go to settings and we can go to sound and media. There we have a few adjustments that we can make. Automatic volume I always turn off. System volume, navigation while getting a phone call, and some adaptive volume and the volume of your drive assists. And that's about all the volume you get to choose. So there's no equalizers or anything here. There's nothing really to do, which is too bad because the system is nice. It actually gives you quite a thumping bass if you want to, but there's nothing here to adjust for the more audio focused buyer. All right, time for a little bit of driving in this Lexus RZ300e. This is the front-wheel drive 200 horsepower version. There's also a four-wheel drive version available with a little over 300 horsepower if that's more your kind of thing. But here in the Netherlands, front-wheel drive is just fine. Not a lot of horsepower, 200-ish for a car that weighs 2 ton, ready to drive. So, you know, that gives you a bit of an idea of the driving experience already. The first thing you notice though is the silence in here. It is so quiet. We have double glass, we have a very big amount of sound deadening, I imagine, because it is very, very quiet in here, which gives you a nice sort of little bit of a luxury feel. It was the first thing my camera woman said this morning when she got in here, like, whoa, this car is really quiet. So that's a big compliment to Lexus, and it kicks off the whole experience of driving this car. And that relates to the powertrain as well. With 200 horsepower, in no way, shape or form is this going to be a traffic light sprinter or anything. It's not a slow car. It is quick-ish because it's electric, so it's instant and all that stuff. But by no means that this car invites you to do anything crazy, any cornering or anything like that. And I think that fits the character of the car as well. I'm not sure what you might want to do with the four-wheel drive version, because it's obviously a bit more powerful, but this one, it has an air of comfort in that way, saying like, hey, we got you, everything's fine, relax and enjoy the journey. And that's actually, I think, a compliment to Lexus as well, that they didn't engineer this car, and they also don't promise this car to be anything other than that, which is actually quite nice. And it's not only the drivetrain, it's also the way you interact with the car. Everything you touch, everything you do, the car does so many things for you. Anything from the way it parks and the way it warns you for everything. It's very much like, hey, we got you, we take care of you, you just enjoy the journey. Here in the back of the Lexus RZ300e, it is a lot of good news. First of all, you can see how much space there is. I'm sitting behind myself with 1.83 meters and about 90 kilos, and there is more than ample of knee room available. And also there's a lot of room under the seat for my feet, depending a little bit on how high or low the driver is sitting, obviously, but there's plenty of space here for me to move around. Obviously there's no transmission tunnel, so that's nice too. If I want to stretch out this way or that way, that is all possible. And the seats in general are very comfortable. The materials are the same as in the front, so that's cool. And there's even some seat heating available back here, so that is nice as well for the comfort of the rear passengers. And overall it is a pleasant place to be. It's a wide car, so there's a lot of space. You can see I'm not intruding to the middle seat too much. I wouldn't say I will sit 3 abreast with myself here, but 2 adults and a child in the middle or some stuff in the middle, no issues whatsoever. I can even recline my seat slightly. It's only about this much, but still, for a little bit of extra comfort, although with my enormously broad shoulders I will then hit this a little bit. But we can also move this one back, and then the whole bench will go backwards for a little bit more space, but obviously that will eat into your boot space slightly. Speaking of boot space, here in the middle tunnel you can see that there is no ski hatch or something, so any longer items that you might have, too bad, that doesn't fit. And the cup holder here is a little bit that could have been better with some kind of cover, because when you're sitting here you're always in there with your wrist or with your hand, and obviously when you move forward you slide into this. So it would have been a bit nicer if this was covered, or at least coming out of the front here, but that is not the case. Luckily there are some nice things back here, like some manual ventilation control, nice and simple. Even though you can't adjust the temperature back here, you can at least adjust the airflow. There is seat heating though, so you're not going to be cold, and there's 2 USBs to charge your children, and if that's not enough, there's an actual power socket back here to charge everything else. So that's pretty good. If I move to the middle, well, this is a significantly harder seat than the 2 seats on the side. And of course there is not that much headroom left when I sit here, but for a short journey no issues whatsoever. And again, there's so much space for my legs and also for my feet back here that it is no issue whatsoever. And thanks to the lack of a transmission tunnel, I can actually move around quite a bit. So that's all good. Obviously it is an SUV, so plenty of space for children, like I already mentioned. The ISOFIX points are down here without any kind of flap or cover, so easily accessible and always available. Pretty straightforward solution, quite like it. The only downside is that you get a lot of stuff that can fall in between here, and that will be messy at some point. Now, to give you a bit of extra context with the size of the boot, we can pull this lever up here and we can fold the whole thing down. That gives you obviously about 1,000 liters of extra space on top of the boot space. And just for reference, you can see how much bigger this gets. And then you also have direct access, obviously, to the boot if necessary. And then when you take the load cover off, you can use all that space. So that's great. That's quite nice and simple. The only downside is you can see the seat belt here is sort of covering this part, and here's the latch for the seat. So if I put the seat back up, it's going to eat up the seat belt. So then it is hidden behind there. But other than that, excellent. What it is though is a very pleasant way to transport people and things. As you saw earlier, there's plenty of space in the back. My kids 10 and 7 fit very easily, obviously, with all their stuff and all their things you might need on a longer journey. So that's more than fine. The boot is big enough for basically anything you want to throw at it. Maybe apart from like a full set of skis, because obviously there's no ski hatch. So it's all just, it's very nice and comfortable and a very well-rounded vehicle that way, which is, I think, exactly what you want from a vehicle like this. The driving experience, like I said, it doesn't invite you to be a hooligan, and in no way will you be, because there's just not enough power for that. But it's very pleasant. You don't feel like super connected to the car or anything like, whoa, I know exactly what kind of paint they used for the lines on the road. But it's engaging enough. Like, I have a good idea of what the car wants to do. I have a good view out. Corners of the car are clearly visible once you've found a suitable driving position. The big wing mirrors give you a proper view behind you, and also the rear window is not too small. So it's just an all-round pleasant place to be and an all-round pleasant vehicle to operate. Despite its size, it is 4.80 meters long. There's no way around that, and there's no thing like four-wheel steering or anything going on. So when you're navigating in tighter spaces like a parking garage, obviously it requires you to pay attention. No worries about the attention that the car is paying, because there is so many bells and bongs going on here that it does drive you somewhat crazy every once in a while. There is, obviously, you can turn all the systems off, but there's anything from lane departure warning and traffic light warning, cross traffic warning, parking warning, object avoidance warning. So many warnings that it is sometimes when you're parking, especially in my garage, I got cars on both sides of my spot. There's like 4 different bongs going on at the same time, which is a bit much if you ask me. So when you have this car, obviously you're going to put it all in exactly the way you want it to be. But you know, driving this car for a week now, it can get a bit much sometimes. Luckily, the menu structure is easy enough to just turn things off easily as well, especially the speed warning and the lane departure things that I always want to have turned off. So as far as that goes, it's all fine. But yeah, there is a lot of systems working for you in order to make sure that you're all right. And it can get slightly, I wouldn't say dangerous, but you get a bit complacent sometimes, because when you start to rely on those systems so much that at some point you forget to pay attention yourself. And that can be, oh, there's one. And that can be slightly tricky. The only real thing I don't like about the driving experience is these joypads that I mentioned earlier. It is just too annoying to have that constantly pop up on my head-up display, which, by the way, is excellent, very nice and bright, and also readable with sunglasses, which doesn't happen often. So that's cool, but yeah, the interaction with these buttons and the head-up display is a bit too much for me. Obviously, this Lexus comes in several flavors as well, so I got the spec sheets and the price list here for you. It kicks off with the front-wheel drive 200 horsepower version that we have here. That's a 300e. That starts with the comfort line for 55,500, the executive line for 57,500, then the luxury line for 61,500, and this president line with everything in it for 64,500 euro. So that's a chunk of money, but obviously as you go up in the range, the equipment levels and the luxury will increase as well. Then you have the 450e, that's the all-wheel drive version. Then you get 313 horsepower. That starts with the executive line for 62,995, the luxury line for just under 67,000, and the president line for just under 70,000 euro, here in the Netherlands at least. So for that, you get quite a lot of car. I have to say, I really like the proposition that Lexus is making here. If you're looking for a good experience of the Lexus brand, I think this is a great example of the car that they can build. It's quiet, it's a pleasant place to be, it's luxury, it's a lot of taking care of you feeling here in the car, which is really nice. Here in the front, you have all the creature comforts that you want, all the technology that you might want to use. In the back, you have ample space, and in the boot, you have a lot of space for things. And I think overall, that's a very strong combination in this form factor. Of course, there's things to complain about. I don't like that the display in front of me is only half a display and a whole bunch of warning lights. The bings and bongs are a bit on the overcautious side for me, if you ask. And I really don't like these joypads in combination with the head-up display. And of course, the fact that there's no rear wiper is something that just bothers me, because that is just annoying. But I have to admit, at that point, it is nitpicking. in overall a great package of a car. I think Lexus has done a great job in making this form factor accessible in the Lexus style. I really like that. And I think if it's something that speaks to you, this sort of effortless luxury way of moving and driving, then this is a very strong proposition in the space. That's all I got for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Give it a thumbs up if you like it. Give it a sub to the channel if you don't want to miss any other videos. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Cheers.